All right, good morning. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Stacy Galloway. I'm the town's communications director. I'm just going to give you a rundown of how the layout of the press conference will go today. We have Mayor Jacques Gilbert with us. He's going to speak first. And then Chief Jason Armstrong will come up and share an update on the case. He'll also take a few questions. So when we get to that point, if you would state your name and your media affiliation, that'd be really helpful for us. So we'll go ahead and get started with Mayor Gilbert.
Thank you, Stacy. Good morning. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here today, and I want to also offer my deepest condolences to the families of Nancy Taylor and Gabrielle Raymond. And I also want to take this time to acknowledge and thank all of the first responders who were part of the response on Monday. After receiving the call, they responded courageously. I want everyone here today to understand that our community is devastated by the events that occurred on Monday. Our entire town is currently grappling with an overwhelming sense of grief. And I want to respectfully request your support in handling the media coverage of this tragic event with the utmost sensitivity. It's come to my attention today that we will be releasing 911 calls, and Chief will talk about that in his statement. This is a very difficult time for all the families, and may I add, our entire community. In this challenging time, I believe it's crucial for the media to demonstrate compassion and empathy. And as the mayor of the town, I ask all of you to use your best discretion when reporting. Your cooperation in this matter will not only respect the privacy and dignity of the families affected, but also foster a sense of healing and support within our community. And again, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today, and I want you to also continue to lift up our community in prayer and also love and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Gilbert. Good morning. My name is Jason Armstrong. I serve as the police chief here for the town of Apex. So, as you all are aware, with this incident, we've received a lot of requests for information, a lot of questions and things. Of course, the 911 calls is something that most of you all have asked for, and so we've finished getting all of them edited and downloaded and edited, redacted, what information needed to be redacted from it. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the recordings that you're going to hear once we send them out, and add some context to it, and provide a little bit more insight and information into some of the things that we know took place on Monday. One thing that I wanted to start off with, we received a lot of questions and inquiries about what our history, the police department's history and previous history and involvement with Mr. Hardman was. And before this incident happened on Monday, the only other interaction that the Apex Police Department had previously had with Mr. Hardman was just this past December. On December 11th of 2023, Mr. Hardman came here to the police department to report a cell phone. He turned over found property. I guess he was an Uber driver, and somebody that he gave a ride to through the Uber service had left their cell phone in his vehicle. And so he came here to turn in that cell phone to us. And so before that, we had not had any interactions, any calls for service or anything involving Mr. Hardman before Monday. Before I get into some of the calls that came in and what I want to talk about, one thing that I wanted to explain is how our 911 system is set up here and how calls come in. So we do have a dispatch center here in Apex and inside the Apex Police Department, but our dispatch center is considered a secondary dispatch center. So it's called, the acronym is PSAP, which stands for Public Safety Answering Point. And so we are a secondary public safety answering point. We partner with Cary Police Department and their communication center, and so they are our primary public safety answering point. So what that means is here in Apex, when you call 911, that 911 call is going to ring in Cary's dispatch center. It's going to ring in Cary's dispatch center, and then when they get the address of the emergency or where the call is, then the call is automatically transferred to the dispatch center here in Apex to get the officers dispatched out to the call. And so with this incident, the very first call that came in that day was placed on our non-emergency number. And so if you call the Apex Police Department's non-emergency number, that phone call comes directly to our dispatch center, is answered by our dispatchers. And so on the day of the incident, I'll wait for the train to go by. On the day of the incident, the first call that came in at 3:02 p.m. It was a call made on our non-emergency number from one of the residents out there at Southwalk. And what that caller was calling to tell us was that there was an individual out in the back of the complex that was being very loud, and what the caller said, the individual was screaming at the sky. So the individual was screaming at the sky, was pacing back and forth, and had a pool stick in his hands that he was kind of waving around. So the information that the dispatcher was receiving, the dispatcher started putting the call information in to dispatch this as a crisis call. And so we call that a CIT call, Crisis Intervention Team. It was a crisis call. So call came in at 3:02. The dispatcher is talking to the caller, is collecting the information, and is asking all of the questions that we ask when we're processing a CIT type call, so we can pass that information on to the officers. While the caller is speaking with the dispatcher, the caller also informs us that an older lady has walked up outside and is talking with the individual that is outside making the noise. And we believe that that was one of our victims, Nancy Taylor. Nancy Taylor is heard walking up and begins speaking with Mr. Hardman. But then the caller says that he believes they're walking away because he can no longer hear their voices outside. And just a few seconds later, the caller states that they believe that they just heard gunshots. In our call system, it shows that the first officers who were dispatched to the CIT call were dispatched at 3:05 p.m. So the call comes in at 3:02 p.m. on our non-emergency line. As the dispatcher is talking with the caller and asking the questions that we ask and getting the information, the call is being typed into the system, and so the first officer is dispatched at 3:05 p.m. But that officer is dispatched to a CIT call, which does not garner an emergency response. So the officer is not driving their lights and sirens because we hadn't received any emergency information yet. Additionally, at 3:05 p.m. is when the first 911 call comes in. That 911 call, as I stated earlier, goes to the Cary Police Department. So they answered that 911 call at 3:05 p.m. Oh, well, I'm done with that paper. That first 911 call that came into Cary's dispatch center came from Gabrielle Raymond's cell phone. On that call, unfortunately, Ms. Raymond did not get a chance to speak to the dispatcher. She did not get a chance to say anything to the dispatcher. On that 911 call, the only thing that we hear are gunshots and screams. From everything that we have uncovered from our investigation to this point, we are confident, we are certain that what we are hearing on that 911 call is the moment that Ms. Taylor and Ms. Raymond are shot and killed by Mr. Hardman. Another note, so as you mentioned, so at 3:05 p.m. is when the shots start, when the shots are fired, and so that triggers a lot of the community members in that neighborhood to start calling 911. So a bevy of 911 calls start to come in, and so all of those calls are coming into Cary, and Cary is, once they get the information of where the call is, then those calls are being transferred to our dispatch center here. So, you know, all those calls will be provided in the release that we send out after this. But there's one additional call that I did want to talk about, and that's a call that comes into 911 at 3:08 p.m. And that call comes from another resident in the neighborhood. And what we learned from that call and from that resident is, when the shots go off and this resident hears the shots, this resident looks outside and sees that there's a gunman outside. Resident goes and grabs his gun and runs outside to confront and challenge the shooter. And as he's challenging the shooter, he has a cell phone out and he calls 911 to report what's going on. There are no gunshots that are exchanged between Mr. Hardman and this courageous resident, but after a few seconds of their confrontation, Mr. Hardman flees from that interaction and begins to retreat towards his residence. So, like I said, that was at 3:08 p.m. is when we got the 911 phone call from that community member. And at 3:09 p.m. is when the first officer arrives on scene. So right as that interaction is unfolding and Mr. Hardman is running away from that individual, officers are arriving on scene. So officers arrive on scene at 3:09 p.m. They spot Mr. Hardman in the front of his residence, and he is retreating inside his residence. Mr. Hardman, when they see him, he is holding a rifle at this point in time. So when they first see him at the front of his residence, he is holding a rifle. As more officers start to arrive on scene, officers kind of split up. So we have some officers that run to the victims and they start rendering aid and checking on the victims and setting up protection for the officers that are checking on the victims. And we have other officers that are setting up a perimeter around the area, as we know, a general area where the suspect has gone inside the residence. As officers are setting up the perimeter, they hear a single gunshot it sounds like it comes from the back of the residence. And officers immediately run to that area where they heard the gunshot come from, and that's where officers encounter Mr. Hardman in the backyard, essentially, of his residence. He is still in possession of the rifle. It's a AR-15 style rifle. Officers confront and challenge him with their weapons drawn. They give him commands to drop the weapon, which he complies with. He does drop the weapon, and he does comply with our orders to get on the ground. And at that time, officers took him into custody and placed handcuffs on him, and that brought the situation to an end. As you all saw in the previous release that we sent out, one of the charges that Mr. Hardman was charged with was a cruelty to animal charge. We did find in his residence his dog, which we learned was his dog, had been shot and killed also. From everything that we have looked at and uncovered with this, we strongly believe that the dog had been shot and killed before these events took place that afternoon at 3 p.m. So we don't know an exact timeline, or we don't know exactly when the dog was shot and killed, but everything that we have gathered thus far and where the dog was and the timeline of everything that we've been able to piece together, we're pretty certain that the dog had already been shot and killed by Mr. Hardman before the shooting incident with our other two victims. So those are some of the 911 calls, recordings that you all are going to get when we send them out, that I wanted to provide some context to. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read some statements that have been provided to me to read on individuals' behalf, to share with you all and to share with the community. The first statement is from the resident that ran out to confront Mr. Hardman. You know, what we typically see with something like this comes out is we know the media wants to talk to that individual and wants to know who they are and get them on camera and all of those things. And so that courageous individual provided a statement for me to read to you all today. And here's this statement. Around 3 p.m. on Monday, January 15th, I heard gunshots that prompted me to open my door and see what was happening. As a neighbor, I was attempting to keep him from hurting anyone else until the police arrived. With that said, I hope you will respect my privacy and allow me to process this horrible tragedy without intrusion. The next statement I'm going to read is a statement from the family of Nancy Taylor. Ms. Taylor's family says, "It is impossible to adequately describe what our family is going through since the senseless and sudden loss of our beloved family member, mother, and grandmother. Nancy doted on her grandsons, moving her life to North Carolina to be close to them. We have a strong faith in God and know Nancy will forever watch over our family. We want to thank the first responders for their courageous actions in responding to this horrific incident and the courageous resident who confronted the suspect. Our greatest desire now is to be granted privacy to grieve and process this incredible and lasting tragedy." And the last statement is a statement from the family of Gabrielle Raymond. "We are grieving the unimaginable loss of our beloved daughter, granddaughter, sister, aunt, and friend, Gabrielle. Our hearts are broken and our minds cannot comprehend how or why such a bright light and future was taken too soon from this world. During this time, we would appreciate the space and privacy to navigate this terrible and senseless tragedy that's taken place." So that is all that I have to share from my update. I do want to reiterate a message that the mayor shared. You know, this is a tragedy that no community wants to experience, and every community worries if they will ever be the next one. And when we have these unfortunate things happen, what I want to remind everybody of is just the impact and the trauma that not only the family endures, but the people of the community endures with this. And you know, like Mayor Gilbert alluded to, I'm asking our partners in the media to be sensitive to that and to understand that there are loved ones that are left behind after this tragedy has unfolded. And you know, with some of the things that you're going to hear in the 911 calls, in particular the call that came from Ms. Raymond's cell phone, I would just say, just think about if it was your loved one on the other end of that, and how would you want that played out for the world to see. So with that being said, I will take some questions.
I think maybe the first question, these questions on CBS 17, the first question I think needs to go to the mayor. We know that police officers have professional grief counselors that they can deal with in situations like this. Mr. Mayor, if you step up to the microphone, tell us, what can the town do at this point to try and help the people in that neighborhood beyond just offering prayers and thoughts? What can they do to try and help them get through this traumatic moment?
You want to take it, Mayor?
Sure.
I think the most important thing to understand is that this entire community is grieving. So when one member of this community is hurting, we all do. So it's really important that we get to a healing process. And the message today is for you to help us with that. So if the media could step in and help us get through that, I think each and every member will start to get to a healing process. So that's what we want to happen.
Are you considering some sort of memorial service or something like that at one point to try and help the neighborhood?
Sure. I would like to work with the police department and the community, and again, work with the families, of course, and get into a healing for our community. So, absolutely.
But before the next question, I want to address that question also. And so some of the resources that we have here at the Apex Police Department, we have victim advocates, we have crisis counselors, we have chaplains, and our entire networking team has been activated after this tragedy. And that's providing services and resources to the family members, that's providing services and resources to the people in that community that have been impacted by this. And so every ounce of our department and our resources and everything that we have been activated to help people deal with what has gone on out there and to serve them. All right, I'm sorry. You have to speak loud. I can't hear the question.
It's been a few days. Have you been able to glean any information? What led up to this? I don't know if the suspect has been cooperative, but were there any indications that perhaps he had an HOA-associated issue, a notice of some sort, maybe he was fined? What caused this?
So we don't know what caused this. We don't have anything that we have uncovered in our investigation at this time that points to, this was a potential catalyst to this happening. Like I said, it all started with that initial call that we got of Mr. Hartman being outside, and his behavior out there is what prompted people to either call us or look outside to see what was going on. And so we haven't uncovered anything. I've heard some of the rumors also about HOA issues and things. That's not anything that we've uncovered as a part of our investigation that would suggest it contributed to what happened out there that day.
Chief Matt Tom from WRAL. Do you believe that he intended to kill more people based on he was out in that backyard with another different kind of weapon?
So we can never say definitively what's going on in somebody's mind and what somebody's intentions are. But as a career law enforcement professional, when we see somebody pick up a weapon like that and then they go outside, they're normally intending to use it. And so I definitely believe that the actions of our officers out there and challenging him in that backyard saved lives that day.
What time about do you anticipate that those 911 calls will be distributed?
It should be shortly, just as soon as I can get back inside and we can get everything cleared up in time. We don't. I mean, they were neighbors. They lived in the same neighborhood. They all lived in the same general area. But beyond that, we're not aware of any, real association or connection between any of them. All right. Thank you all for coming out.
So guys, if you have specific email addresses that you'd like to receive the information from, please write that down on the table here and we'll get those 911 calls to you.